Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into the life of a historical titan, a guy whose intellectual fingerprints literally shaped the foundational texts of Islamic scholarship. We're talking about an absolute legend, a master of memory known as Abu Bakr Ibn Abi Shaybah. I am so excited to walk you through his historical profile today, so let's just jump right in.
Just picture this for a second. Imagine the sheer scholarly gravity it takes to mentor history's most famous compilers of Hadith, the recorded sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad. Now imagine doing that while commanding public audiences of 30,000 people at one time, long before microphones even existed. Honestly, who could possibly wield that kind of influence?
Well, to answer that, we really have to start at the beginning. Ibn Abi Shaybah wasn't just some solitary genius who appeared out of nowhere, not at all. He was born into an environment where Islamic scholarship was, quite literally, the family trade, a true powerhouse of learning.
So his full name was Abdullah bin Muhammad al-Absi, but he's universally known as Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shaybah. His father, Qadi Ibrahim bin Ithman bin Huwasata, was actually a judge. And it didn't stop there. His brothers Uthman and Qasim were major scholars themselves. Uthman was a renowned memorizer. Even his descendants carried the torch. His son Ibrahim, his nephew Muhammad, as the historical sources put it, they were a literal house of knowledge. But even among all of them, Abu Bakr stood out as the absolute greatest.
A contemporary scholar named Yahya ben Abd al-Hamid noted their fierce dedication perfectly. He said, "The children of Ibn Abi Shaybah are people of knowledge. They crowded us at every muhaddith or hadith scholar. They were just relentless. From a really young age, Abu Bakr and his siblings were physically competing for space in the learning circles of every great teacher they could find."
14. That is the age Abu Bakr began his intense studies with his greatest early teacher, Sharik bin Abdullah. Just 14. In fact, Ibn Abi Shaybah later reflected on this specific time and confidently claimed that his capacity for memorization at 14 was at its absolute peak, way sharper than even in his later years.
Building on that incredible, prodigious start, he actively sought out the towering intellects of his era all across Iraq and the Hijaz region of Arabia. We are talking about absolute heavyweights here. Figures like Abu al-Ahwas, the great Abdullah bin al-Mubarak, Sufyan bin Uyayna, Waqi bin al-Jarrah, and Yahya al-Qattan. He just absorbed massive oceans of knowledge from these masters, building an unparalleled foundation.
And because he learned from the most distinguished minds, well, he naturally went on to teach the next generation of giants. His own students included foundational pillars like Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, Ahmed bin Hanbal, and Abu Zur'a. He wasn't just participating in the scholarly tradition, he was the vital bridge. The bridge connecting the early masters directly to the compilers whose books are studied all over the world today.
But what exactly made him so indispensable to all these famous figures, right? To really understand that, we need to shift our focus to the most astonishing aspect of his career, his almost mythical, ironclad memory. Seriously, it was a memory so perfect it literally became a proverb among his peers.
Get this, there's this legendary anecdote narrated by al-Falas. He recalled a time when Ibn Abi Shaybah came to them alongside Ali bin al-Madini. In a single sitting, Abu Bakr flawlessly recited exactly 400 complex hadiths, complete with all their intricate chains of transmission entirely from memory to al-Shaybani. 400! He didn't check notes, he didn't stumble once, he delivered the text perfectly, and then he just stood up and left. No big deal, right?
So how did his contemporaries actually categorize this genius? Well, Imam Abu Ubaid famously broke down mastery among 4 specific giants of the era. He said Ahmed bin Hanbal was the top expert in jurisprudence, understanding the permitted and forbidden. Ali bin al-Madini was the absolute best at vocal delivery. Yahya bin Ma'in was the master of verifying authenticity. But Ibn Abi Shaybah, he was the ultimate master of structuring and organizing the text into a cohesive book. He just saw how all the information fit together like a giant puzzle.
His credibility among these peers was just towering. Take it directly from his illustrious contemporary Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, who declared, "Abu Bakr is truthful, he is dearer to me than his brother Uthman." And coming from Imam Ahmad, a man who is famous for his incredibly strict standards of evaluation, this level of personal and professional validation speaks volumes about Abu Bakr's reliability.
And the testimonies just keep rolling in. The great scholar Abu Zur'a offered this really definitive statement. He said,
I have never seen anyone with a better memory than Abu Bakr bin Abi Shaybah. In fact, when rival scholars from Baghdad actually tried to challenge this claim, Abu Zur'a fiercely defended him. He essentially waved off the Baghdad critics, calling them people of deception, compared to Abu Bakr's unmatched retention.
This perfectly exact memorization didn't just make him a great repository of information, though. It gave him immense intellectual boldness. He wasn't intimidated by anyone. His unshakable confidence allowed him to boldly challenge other giants of his time during these really high-stakes academic discussions. This is perfectly captured in a truly fascinating story. Once, the great Yahya bin Ma'in, remember the master of authenticity we just talked about, presented a solitary hadith narrated from a scholar named Hafs bin Ghiyath. Ibn Abi Shaybah immediately and confidently rejected it. Why? Well, he didn't just know the hadiths, he literally knew the physical layout of the source material. He declared, where did he get this? These are Hafs's books, this hadith isn't in them. He was relying purely on his exact photographic knowledge of the physical source texts. Unbelievable.
Now let's transport ourselves to the physical space where he exerted all this authority. In the Great Mosque, there was this specific, legendary pillar. It was recorded by scholars like Abdan al-Hawazi that when Abu Bakr sat there to teach, this incredible scene would unfold. All the other heavyweights would sit in complete silence, while Abu Bakr, with total, unquestioned authority, would literally roar his knowledge to the gathered masses.
And this wasn't just any ordinary piece of architecture, by the way. Let's map out the chronological succession of this exact spot. According to the scholar Ibn al-Qada, this was originally the teaching pillar of Abdullah bin Masud, a famous companion of the Prophet Muhammad. That means this physical spot held immense historical prestige. After him, the scholarly torch at this very pillar passed to Alqama, then to Ibrahim, and then to Mansur.
From there, the torch was passed further down the line to the great Sufyan al-Sawri, then to Waki, until it rightfully landed with Abu Bakr bin Abi Shaybah. Visually mapping this out really cements his authority, doesn't it? He was the direct, physical heir to a scholarly lineage stretching all the way back to the earliest days of Islam.
So all this immense authority beautifully sets the stage for the dramatic climax of his life. We are now entering a period of massive political and ideological turbulence during the Abbasid era. This was the ruling empire of the time, and the very nature of theology was being fiercely debated at the absolute highest levels of government. As a matter of historical record, in the Islamic calendar year 234 AH, Caliph al-Mutawakkil initiated a major shift in state doctrine. To establish this new direction, he summoned leading scholars, ordering them to publicly narrate texts that countered shifting theological movements of the time, specifically the Mu'tazila and Jamiyah. Because of his towering status, Abu Bakr, along with his brother Uthman, were among the key figures brought forward for this monumental public task.
And this brings us right back to that breathtaking number we teased at the very beginning. When Ibn Abi Shaybah took his seat at the Al-Rusafa Mosque to fulfill this summons, the historical sources note that a staggering crowd of approximately 30,000 people gathered just to hear him speak. 30,000! It is just an awe-inspiring scale of influence for a single scholar.
Shortly after this absolute peak of his public career, his life's journey drew to a close. But as we transition to his final days, it's abundantly clear that while his physical roaring voice at the pillar may have been silenced, his structural genius was about to become eternal.
Remember how Abu Ubaid said he was the best at structuring a book? Well, he left behind massive, monumental written works to prove it. Categorized collections known as al-Musannaf, transmitter-based books like al-Musnad, and Quranic explanations known as al-Tafsir. These texts didn't just sit on a dusty shelf somewhere. They became the absolute bedrock of Islamic source methodology. They were utilized by nearly every single scholar who came after him.
Tracing his final timeline, that grand gathering at Al-Rusafa took place in 234 AH. Just a short time later, in the month of Muharram, in 235 AH, Abu Bakr bin Abi Shaybah passed away. But that house of knowledge we talked about, it didn't close its doors. The scholarly torch smoothly continued, passing directly to his son, the steadfast Hafiz Ibrahim. He ensured his father's life's work would endure for generations.
So this leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. In an age way before hard drives, the cloud, or search engines, how would the very fabric of Islamic scholarship, literally the way this information is structured and preserved today, look without the foundational genius of Ibn Abi Shaybah? It's a remarkable legacy to ponder.
Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this sparked your curiosity to explore even more of these fascinating historical profiles.